Welcome from the Salt and Light Media Studio at Nebraska Family Alliance. I'm Nate Graz, Executive Director at NFA, and we are honored to be joined today by a very special guest and one of our good friends in the fight for faith, family, and freedom, Jonathan Alexandre, who serves as Senior Counsel with Liberty Counsel. And we couldn't be more excited to have Jonathan here with us in Nebraska to share about our work. So Jonathan, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I think this is my wife and I's third trip together, but my fourth trip total to Nebraska. So it's always great to be back.
Well, we love having you here. Wish we could have you here more.
Yeah.
But we're thrilled to have you here. You joined us actually for National Day of Prayer this year, and I got to speak at our Capitol, which was such a blessing and encouragement for people. And in your role, you actually advise lawmakers, policymakers at the federal level, the state level, the local level.
Yeah.
So what's going on right now, kind of big picture, nationally at the federal level, particularly that people of faith, people who care about the direction of our country, should be aware about?
Yeah. Well, I think we've done an incredible job in the last 2 years. Certainly, the Trump administration has brought in a great team that does have a good recognition for faith and for the right to worship. And so there's sort of a top current or over the water view of religion that I think is favorable. There's a White House faith office, but there is still a subtle undercurrent of things that we do have to pay attention to. As a religious litigation firm, oftentimes we get phone calls still of a young boy that wants to, in his high school graduation, talk about God, and his principal says you can't, or a young girl that wants to be able to only participate in sports teams with other biological females, and she's forced to be in this sort of transgender narrative and competing in sports in that arena. And parents having their kids sent home with education material, if you can call it that are really perverse. And so despite there being sort of a top-line recognition of faith, the president praying and reading the Bible from the Oval Office, that's a big deal. There still is an undercurrent of a persecution towards Christians that keep us busy and that keep us working in this arena.
Yeah, well, we're really thankful for your work and Liberty Counsel really being on the front lines, defending our most cherished freedoms. Recently there's been a lot of news at the federal level regarding the FDA and their rules allowing the chemical abortion pill to be sent through the mail without even a doctor visit. Which that really seems like it's kind of the next battleground for the pro-life movement and the fight for life. What are you seeing in relation to that issue and what's happening right now surrounding chemical abortion?
Yeah, a number of things. I'm glad you call it chemical abortion because it's not medicine abortion. It's not the surgical abortion that that we're sort of used to, this brick and mortar done in buildings, albeit behind a curtain. What is being done now is, after the fall of Roe v. Wade, the abortion industry has taken sort of a mail order approach where they're just not even in a telehealth requirement anymore, mailing pills to these girls, these young women that could be 7-10 weeks age of gestation with their baby. They're told to go home, basically turn on the shower, not to look as the baby is starved with this pill mifepristone and is expelled. It's graphic as you can imagine it and conjure it up. And none of the safety protocols at the time in the early 2000s when this pill was introduced, none of them were followed. None of the subsequent REMs were adhered to as the pill became more and more increased in use. You have upwards of 600,000 to 700,000 abortions done via the chemical pill with this young girl all by herself. And, it's not just a traumatic experience for the girl or the woman, but we're losing whole intact babies into our water, into our sewer systems. And the FDA up until now has not done everything that they can. We have the promise that they will, but they've not done everything that they can in order to study the pill, to show its 1 in 11 harms when it's being used, and really to pull that thing off the market, not just to save the babies, but also to protect these women and young girls that are being lied to and forced to use these chemical abortion pills.
Yeah, it's really sad, what's happening around that issue. And we actually just helped file that amicus brief with the U.S. Supreme Court urging them to do away with that FDA rule and to do the right thing to protect both women and children, like you've talked about. So that's something we're really going to be focused on and continuing to pray for. So I also know you're out in Maryland.
Yeah.
Very different environment from here in Nebraska.
That's right.
What are you seeing back in Maryland and as you travel to different states across the country?
Yeah, we used the word decoupling, and it's the only time I've heard it used really outside of a truck driving a tractor trailer. But Maryland saw itself as decoupling itself from the federal government in any way, which is basically it being a repudiation against the Trump administration. And that all means every good common sense policy that was put out by the Trump administration in the last 2 years, Maryland found a way to try to hijack it or get rid of it. So basically the free money that follows students via this tax granting and school choice program, Maryland was like, no, we're going to pass a law so that you can't do this. Trump wanting stronger elections and election integrity. Like, no, we're just going to gerrymander the state and get rid of the one conservative voice that's there. There are so many issues that were tied to why Americans voted for a Trump administration, why they sent a majority to the House and Senate, that Maryland is trying to undo. And so, as you can imagine, it's different from Nebraska, but we really are fighting a battle uphill for two reasons, not just to preserve our state, the founding of our state, but also so this cancer doesn't spread, so that you can't have a little aisle next to D.C. bashing the administration and saying, hey, rest of the country, you can do the same thing. So our fight is one that is pretty consistent. It's a short session. It's only 90 days. But just like you all here in Nebraska, I know you rely on your supporters. You rely on the testimony, folks showing up, folks praying certainly and being active. That's what preserves a state like this one and hopefully what pushes back against some of the really bad things that we've seen happen in Maryland this session.
Yeah. I mean, it takes that constant vigilance and people stepping up and speaking out and not being afraid, to stand up for our values and what we believe. And so I'd love to hear, from your perspective, both as you work in Maryland and across the country, the impact or the difference that you see when people of faith are engaged and they are active in, contacting their elected officials. They know what's happening at their capital. What kind of difference does it make when people of faith, take our role and responsibility seriously in the public square?
Yeah, it makes an incredible difference. So much in the public square, but really around the dinner table as well. You and I are raising young kids. I'm raising 2 young girls in the state of Maryland, and it's a question that's always asked, what is this country that you're going to leave to your children? Are you optimistic? And I'm like, yeah, I'm optimistic. I just spent the last, 8 hours huddled at the state capitol, battling where it mattered the most, trying to preserve the innocence of children by pushing away these perverse curriculums, trying to allow pastors and counselors to have the freedom to counsel individuals away from unwanted same-sex attraction, keeping boys and girls in separate locker spaces. Like, yeah, I'm optimistic. Have you seen the groundswell of faith of people coming together that are showing up? It makes you really have faith and trust in God's providence, knowing that he's always going to have a faithful few that are determined to do the fight, and that you can pass on to the next generation. The really good thing that's been handed to us in this country, this freedom to worship, and ensure that more and more minds along the way be convinced of the truth of Christ, and more hearts come to learn and to worship him as Lord. So I am optimistic, and it is because of the daily work of people of faith that are showing up, that are supporting, that are praying, and that are part of this fight with us.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. You remind me of Ronald Reagan's famous quote that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It's not passed through the bloodstream. It has to be fought for and protected and handed down to the next generation. And we've reached a real turning point, I think, in our nation's history. And in fact, this year is America's 250th anniversary. Sort of as you look at where we've been as a nation and where we're going and really sort of being at this fork in the road, what gives you that hope and that optimism that America, that we're going to continue to see better days. We're going to continue to see those foundational principles and values protected. What gives you that?
Yeah, well, there's been a lot that has tried to stop it from early on and throughout. There's been a lot of tests. The COVID years were a massive test, whether or not we're going to allow, state governments or the federal government to dictate us either taking certain medicines that they decided or vaccinations just for us to keep our job, or shut down our churches altogether, or close out our enterprises and businesses. And we repudiated that. Went up to the Supreme Court 4 times to say that churches are essential. In no other point in history going forward can you ever shut down a church because of a so-called pandemic. You can't do that anymore based on the interpretations that we've won at the Supreme Court. And that's a big victory. That's a long-lasting victory. The other thing that is encouraging is that we're pretty young. So, it takes sort of a millennia for the Turks or Britain or Persia to rise to their level of civilizational dominance and really have an influence on the world. We're just 250 years old. We're still toddlers in this fight. And so there's some growing pains, obviously, and we still bear the scars of a lot of those pains. But I think we're stronger people now because of them, because we've suffered through the tough stuff and have made a people still united, a people that still casts a ballot that they believe in. We work through election integrity to do so, and a people that want to give to their children a recognition that God is still on the books. He's still in every constitution. He's still worshipped. He's still endowed us with the rights of life and liberty. And as long as we can point to that as our North Star, I think we'll be just fine.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I'd love to hear too, how can all of us be more engaged on these issues, and how can people specifically maybe be praying, for our country, for our elected officials, and for you and the work that's being done in defense of our freedoms and values?
Yeah, the engagement is something practical. I don't think I've ever answered this question this way. I've been asked it a lot. I've never answered the question this way. But at your small sort of Republican meetings, or your small women's Republican club, or it's always, not well attended. If we could just show up on that Tuesday night, at the restaurant or at the pub, wherever folks are gathering, and just do this, do the exchange, come with like-minded patriots and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing in my neighborhood. What do you think? That engagement, it takes an extra effort, I think. And I just encourage folks to do that. Also, one thing I don't like is whenever there's an uncontested election, whenever one person just jumps into the fight and doesn't have to make an argument, even if they're on our side, you have to be able to stand up for what you believe in and to be able to defend why you should be the right candidate. And so if there's unopposed races, join in, get in the fight, if you have that calling to run for office. So those two things, show up at the local small Patriots Club, join their work, certainly join the effort here, and get your name on a ballot, make a difference.
Yeah, there's things that we all can be doing. And, we're really fortunate to live in a nation where we have those rights and those freedoms to actually participate in our form of government. And, our kids and our children's children are really depending on our faithfulness today. But what a great privilege that we have to get to stand for truth and to represent Christ at this moment in history.
Amen.
So as we continue forward, just know how grateful we are, Jonathan, for you, for Liberty Counsel, for the work that is being done. It's so important. This is a critical time in the history of our country. But as you shared, we are optimistic.
That's right.
We have a lot to be thankful for, a lot to be grateful for. And despite the challenges of our time, we know that God is for us.
Amen.
So thanks for what you're doing. We appreciate you coming to Nebraska. It's an honor to have you here.
The 4th time. There'll be a 5th, and a 6th, and a 7th.
I hope that 5th time is here again soon.
Yes,
so thank you for what you're doing, and God bless.
Thank you, Nate.